The Putney Debates were a series of discussions between members of the new model army, a number of the participants being levellers, concerning the make-up of a new constitution for Britain. After seizing the City of London from Presbyterian opponents in August 1647, the new model army had set up its headquarters at Putney, in the county of Surrey. The debates began on the 28th of October 1647 at the Church of St.Mary the Virgin, but moved to the nearby lodgings of Thomas Grosvenor, Quartermaster General of Foot, the following day. The debates lasted until the 11th of November. Background: earlier that summer, Oliver Cromwell, Henry Ireton and other officers, known as the Grandees, attempted to negotiate a settlement with Charles I of England in the aftermath of the First Civil War. The proposals, termed the Heads of Proposals, included provisions for social justice, but the monarchy and House of Lords would have retained a power of veto over the House of Commons. A further feature of the Heads of Proposals was that the king would be restored before the issues of the soldiers' indemnity and arrears were entrenched in law. This was contrary to the new model army's declaration of the 14th of June 1647, and consequently the Heads of Proposals lost the support of the more radical elements among the military and civilian populations. The new model army was the first army in history to have some kind of democratic debate in its ranks. Sometime before October 1647, 5 of the most radical cavalry regiments elected new agitators, known as the New Agents, to represent their views. The New Agents issued a political manifesto. The case of the army truly stated. The fundamental ideas of the case of the army would later be reflected in the constitutional proposals drafted in the agreement of the people. The Putney Debates came about as a result of the publication of the case of the army. According to the author of a book called A Call to All the Soldiers of the Army, Ireton was so incensed by the case of the army that the new agents were invited to debate the case of the army before the General Council of the Army. Debates. The Radicals wanted a constitution based upon manhood suffrage, biennial parliaments and a reorganization of parliamentary constituencies. Authority was to be vested in the House of Commons rather than the King and Lords. Certain native rights were declared sacrosanct for all Englishmen: freedom of conscience, freedom from impressment into the armed forces and equality before the law. Commander-in-Chief Fairfax was unwell and could not be present. Sir Cromwell sat in the chair. Cromwell flatly refused to accept any compromise in which the king was overthrown, while Henry Ireton pressed the case that the Heads of the Proposals covered all of the concerns raised by the new agents in the case of the army. The new agents accepted the meeting, sending Robert Everard and another new agent from Cornwallis's regiment, only identified as Bedfordshire man. Other members of the army present were Colonel Thomas Rainsborough, his brother Major William Rainsborough, and the agitators Edward Sexby and William Allen. The new agents also brought John Wildman and Maximilian Petty, 2 civilian advisers who had been involved with army affairs since at least July 1647. The debates opened on the 28th of October and were transcribed by Secretary William Clark and a team of stenographers. From the 2nd of November, however, all recording ceased. The debates were not reported and Clark's minutes were not published at the time. They were lost until 1890, when they were rediscovered at the Library of Worcester College, Oxford, and subsequently published as part of the Clark Papers. Cromwell and Ireton's main complaint about the agreement was that it included terms for near-universal male suffrage, which Ireton considered to be anarchy. Instead, they suggested suffrage should be limited only to landholders. The agitators, on the other hand, felt they deserved the rights in payment for the service during the war. Thus Thomas Rainsborough argued, and Ireton, for the Grandees. Conclusion. The debates concluded with the understanding that a modified version of the agreement, approved by a committee chosen mainly from the ranks of the army's officers, would be the basis of any future constitutional settlement, and that it would be presented to the army itself at a mass meeting. However, the agitators wanted to discuss the future of the king, and the grandees, fearing a complete breakdown of discipline in the army, proposed on the 8th of November that the agitators and new agents return at once to the regiments to restore order, thereby suspending the meetings. This was reinforced on the 11th of November when King Charles escaped from Hampton Court Palace, apparently fearing that the grandees could easily lose control of the more radical elements in the army. Charles I's flight brought all debate to an end, as the new model army were faced with a more immediate threat. On the same day, the General Council drafted a new manifesto to be presented at the mass meeting, which, among other provisions, contained a clause in which the members of the army would sign a declaration of loyalty to Fairfax, the Commander-in-Chief, and the General Council. The presentation itself was split from one mass meeting to three smaller ones. Those regiments invited to the first meeting on the 15th of November agreed with the manifesto, but two regiments arrived uninvited and objected, sparking the Cork-Bushfield Mutiny. Cromwell suppressed the mutiny, and at the other two meetings the other regiments agreed to the terms in the manifesto. On the 7th of December 1647, at a meeting in Windsor, the General Council drew up a non-political petition to present to Parliament called the Humble Representation of the General Council of the Army, and a month later, on the 8th of January 1648, the General Council voted to terminate itself.